Yeah, so the title, though, is Remain. Now, I mean, years ago, I never would have preached a sermon from John 15 entitled it Remain. But guess what I found out? As I studied and I looked and I concentrated and I tried to understand what was going on, I found out that remain is a very important part of this chapter. In fact, the number one thing, and I'm going to be able to prove it to you, the number one thing that Jesus had in mind when he was saying this to his disciples was that he wanted them to remain. That was it. I know that because he literally explicitly says that in John 16, verse 1, right? So I entitled it Remain. And let's see what. All right. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. I want to give you a little bit of context. This is in the middle of what people will call Jesus's farewell discourse. John's a very interesting gospel because a whole large section of John has to do with just everything right around the time that Jesus was going to be crucified. And so chapter 14 to 17 is called the Farewell Discourse. And so where are they? They're in Jerusalem. It's the time of the Passover. They are just after the Last Supper. I've really tried to figure this out, and it looks to me that they haven't left where the Last Supper is, but they're going to leave where the Last Supper is. And right after this conversation, they're going to leave. And they're going to head over to the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is what's taking place here. Now, Jesus is speaking to his apostles, but he's not speaking to Judas because he's already basically told Judas, you need to go ahead and go and do what you're going to do. And Judas is left. So he's speaking specifically to his apostles, and there's no Judas there. And he's getting ready to go to Gethsemane, and it's the night before he was going to be crucified. So this is a very intense time. So many things are going on when this John chapter 15 comes into play. And so, see, that's why I have to check, because I got to know that it actually happened. And there we go. All right. Let's read John 15, 1 to 8. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me who bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit. Pretty awesome stuff. He has this metaphor of a vine. Most likely they would have had in mind a grapevine. And so in the metaphor, comes up here. Yeah. Well, you can see in the metaphor, he gives us some definitions. He says, I am the true vine, or I am the vine, both of those things. So Jesus is the vine. My Father is the gardener. So there we have the vine, the gardener. He's speaking specifically to the apostles, although I do believe that this applies to disciples, but at the time, at the moment, for the context, it is the apostles he's talking to. But just through other knowledge of the Bible, things like that, they're going to go and make disciples. They're going to teach them to obey everything he's commanded them, all of those things. And so that's our practical application. But the apostles there, they are the branches in this conversation. There's a conversation going on there. It's very interesting because he does not explicitly describe what the fruit is, although from the context, I'll show you, it's going to be easy to understand fruit, but he doesn't explicitly say what the fruit is. And that's probably because there's too much to it. You just can't say it in 4 words. And so, Jesus is the true vine. The Father is the gardener. The apostles are the branches in this metaphor. And so what else does this passage talk about? Well, you probably can't, I don't know if you can read it or not, and it doesn't matter, but did you notice there's a lot of yellow up there? The yellow up there represents what times Jesus was talking about remaining in this passage. All that yellow has to do with remaining. That's a lot. That's a lot there. And so one of the main things he was trying to communicate was the importance of remaining. And so I highlight it there. There's another one too. The green. The green represents Jesus talking about fruit. So you have fruit, you have remaining, and you have fruit. That's a lot of green right there. And all I want you to see is how much of it is green right now, because it's a lot. And so from that, it's very easy to understand, what is Jesus going to be talking about? Well, he's going to be talking about remaining. He's going to be talking about fruit. That's what this metaphor is going to be all about. And so this is what we're going to talk about today. An introduction to the vine metaphor, because there is a little introduction that Jesus gives. And then we're going to talk about, what does it mean remaining in the vine? And what does it mean bearing much fruit? That's what we're going to get into. I'm super excited about it. If you are used to reading this scripture many, many, many times, don't turn me off and start talking and thinking about what you're having for lunch, okay? Because I really want us to get into this and talk about it. All right, so let's look at this. The introduction to the metaphor is here, verse 1-3. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me who bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. That's the introduction right there. And let me see if I can. Okay, that's the introduction. The first part is, I am the true vine. I spent a lot of time thinking about that part. I am the true vine. Well, Jesus is the true vine, because there are also vines that are not true vines. There are false vines as well. Let me play with the metaphor a little bit, okay? He's the true vine. There are false vines as well. What are some of the false vines that Jesus might have had in mind? Well, first of all, there were people who came before him. There were people who were there on earth, here on earth when he was here. And there were people who came after him that claimed to be the Messiah. They were false vines. They weren't the Messiah. What else might he have been thinking about? How about Israel's religious leaders, and also sort of the religious system that Israel had at the time? That was a false vine. You know, I mean, that was what everybody would go to. They would think, you know, all right, I want to learn from our leaders. I want to participate in the temple worship. I want to be involved in all of this. Shouldn't this be the true vine? Well, yes, actually. Yes, it should be the true vine, but it wasn't the true vine, because things were going backwards. I'll explain that to you in a minute. What about wealth? You say, how does wealth come in? Why would Jesus be thinking about wealth right now? Well, I mean, didn't Judas just leave a few minutes earlier? Didn't he just leave a few minutes earlier? And what was pulling Judas away? There may have been a lot of things that pulled Judas away, but the only thing the Bible actually really gives us is that he was getting money for what he was doing. And he had already been taking a little money anyway, stealing a little money anyway. So what about wealth? Maybe Judas, you know, his vine was going to be money, the security, everything that comes from that. What am I talking about? Well, what comes from the vine? This is where all the nutrients come into the plant. This is where all the water, or not all, but a lot of the water comes into the plant. This is how the plant has structure. It gives everything else security. They're built on that vine. Everything's supposed to come, nutrients, water, sustenance, security from the vine to the branches. That's how it's supposed to work. That is how the temple was supposed to work. God was to work through Israel's leaders, providing sustenance, providing spiritual nourishment, providing the nutrients they needed to thrive. Not the other way around, but at this particular time, it was going the other way around. Those religious leaders were taking from the people. The temple was supposed to be giving out. Instead, the temple was taking in. They had turned the temple into a marketplace, for example. And the leaders were trying to get what they could out of the position that they were in, instead of being used by God for God to flow his blessings out to the people. They were not the true vine anymore, but Jesus, he was the true vine. And that's why he starts out with this statement, I am the true vine. All right. Now let's look at this. My Father is the gardener. You know that I've never spent much time thinking about Jesus saying my Father is the gardener, because I've spent most of my life just kind of thinking about evangelism when I'm here and outreach and seeing people become Christians and that sort of thing. And I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about my Father is the gardener. Let me just ask you this question seriously now. If you're going to be in a vine, who would you want to have be your gardener? I mean, who doesn't want God to be the gardener? I want the creator of the universe to be the gardener of the vine that I'm in. What an amazing blessing to have God engaging in our lives as branches of the vine. What a blessing. Man, these disciples here, they must be thinking, wow, that's pretty awesome. Jesus is the vine, God's the gardener. This is a great situation. This is what Jesus is trying to do because he wants them to remain. He's like, check this vine out, man. God is the gardener. What does the gardener do? They plant, they provide, they prune, they protect, and they help produce. This is what the gardener does. Anybody here a gardener? I am a gardener. I'm not a very good gardener, but I am a gardener. Sometimes I'm usually good at planting, because if you don't plant, well, you don't have a garden. But I'm not always all that great at providing and pruning and protecting, and therefore my plants don't always produce all that well, because of that part. But this is what God does for us. This is what God does for those who are connected to the vine. Perhaps you've had a mentor in your life. Many of us have. In college, I had a mentor over at University of Maryland. Dr. Kangas was my mentor. Dr. Kangas used to tell me what classes to take. And I'm going to tell you what I used to think. Oh, he's out of his mind. Why does he want me to take those classes? I don't want to take that class. That's a boring class. Oh, I will never use that class in my career. I mean, these are the kind of things that I thought. Can I just admit? I mean, not always, but sometimes I thought this. I was like, man, half the classes that he made me take, I'll probably never use in my career. Then I got out into my career. And I just remember looking back and going, man, I'm so glad Dr. Kangas made me take those classes. I'd never be able to do my job if I didn't take those classes. It was amazing. He was a mentor. I later had a mentor as I was a young ecologist, and I was really interested in studying waterfowl. Waterfowl are like ducks and geese and that sort of thing. I wanted to study waterfowl and geese and ducks, things like that. And so my mentor, Matt Perry, he used to say, Steve, there's no future in waterfowl. It's kind of funny, there's no future in waterfowl. Who talks like that? He's like, wetlands. Wetlands are where the future is in our field. You need to study wetlands, And so all the projects I did working for Matt had to do with studying wetlands. Later on, as I look back, I was thanking God. I'm so grateful that Matt Perry taught me about wetlands. It was fantastic. I built a whole entire career around the knowledge that I had on freshwater wetlands. It was true what Dave said. I did have an awesome job, and it was primarily built around the classes that Dr. King has forced me to take and the field of study and field of research that Matt Perry, Dr. Perry, he also pushed me into, and it made my whole career. Maybe you can think back of some people who have helped you like that. But I'm just going to tell you something, man. Having God as the gardener, that is way better than having an awesome mentor. Okay. I mean, it is way better than having an awesome mentor. Can you imagine? I mean, it's just phenomenal that God is like considering our future. God is considering the desires of our heart. He's considering our needs. He's even considering our wants. And he's thinking about how to make them come true. And he's trying to take care of us mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, every other kind of need that we could think of. This is God. God is the gardener. This is my favorite part of this entire chapter. Just thinking about God being the gardener. I just feel like if God is the gardener, somehow everything is going to be okay. It's all going to work out. And by the way, if he wasn't the gardener, who would be a better gardener? And Jesus wanted to let them know that God is the gardener. I haven't found a magic place to point to right here. Oh, I got it. Good. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Hey, I hope you like my purple. Do you like my purple? It's supposed to make you think of fruit. Purple. Grapes. Pretty grapes. Purple. Yeah. What was Jesus thinking about when he said he cuts off every branch in me who bears no fruit? When I was a young Christian, this scared me to death. I was like, oh my gosh, God is looking up there. And if I don't produce enough, he's going to cut me right out of the church and it's going to be all over for me. Well, what a horrible way to live. But that's what I thought, because that was just where my knowledge was at the time. Well, what was Jesus thinking about here? Well, first of all, I feel like he was thinking about Judas. I mean, at the very moment that Jesus said this, who was getting cut off? Judas. He didn't have very much longer to live, did he? Because the fruit wasn't being born in Judas. Even though he had Jesus's words, they were not impacting him. He went and turned to another vine instead. He must have been thinking about Judas, first of all. I'm sure when the apostles looked back on this, they were like, yeah, I remember when Jesus said that. And then they remember what happened to Judas. They're like, Judas was on his mind. What about the Jewish leaders? They were betraying Jesus for power. What about the Jewish leaders? Do you remember right before this, Jesus was coming into Jerusalem and he was agonizing over what was going to happen to Jerusalem? And he just thought, man, if I could just bring them under my wings, like a hen gathers her chicks, that would be so awesome. But he's agonizing over them because he knew they're getting cut off. He's the one who prophesied about what would happen in AD 70. In AD 70, General Titus, the Roman general, came and surrounded Jerusalem and destroyed Jerusalem after starving most of them to death. And then they completely tore the temple apart. He must have been thinking about them being cut off. All these things, Judas, the Jewish leaders, the Jerusalem temple system, everything being cut off, because even after everything Jesus did, he could bear no fruit in those people's lives. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Well, he's saying this to the apostles, so I know for sure he's thinking about the apostles. He's talking to them right now. But I think he must have also been thinking about what was going to happen, and I'll show you why later. But the establishment of the church, just thinking about the fruit, you're going to be pruned. These apostles, he's starting out with the apostles and a small number of disciples. They're going to be pruned. They're going to bear even more fruit. Must have been pumped up about the start of the church. And that's his current disciples, but his future disciples. He must have been so fired up. I know that because actually he prays about this very soon after he says these words. Yeah. See one minute. Let's talk about this a little bit more. The word prunes and the word clean. Well, the phrase he prunes and he cleans is the exact same phrase in Greek. Exact same phrase. You say, oh, wow, I'm impressed by that guy. He must know Greek. No, my footnote in my Bible said that. So that little C next to it, I looked down at the C, and it's what it said. You can do this. You can definitely do this. That's what the footnote said. If the footnote was right, then what I'm telling you is true. That's all I can say. I'm relying on the footnote. But then it started getting me thinking, same word. But it's interesting because pruning and cleaning could also be the same word in English too. You're like, really? Well, just think about it. Let's just say you're hanging out with a friend. You got some vines over there with grapes growing on it. You need to prune it before lunch. You're like, man, I got to get out there and prune those vines before lunch. You could say that, but you could say this too. Man, I got to get out there and clean up those vines before lunch. We would absolutely say that. Absolutely. It's similar. We could see how that would be. And so that's why you see this word clean and pruning. It's all coming in. You're already clean because the word that I've spoken to you. This is very interesting about this because earlier in John 13, which is the same night, probably the same place, and Jesus was washing his disciples' feet. It says, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean. Though not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he said, not everyone was clean. You see how I started putting this together? Jesus, when he was saying these things, he must have been thinking about Judas. At least one of the things he must have been thinking about was Judas, because he told them they were clean, and he's pruning off the ones that aren't fruitful, and they're also getting pruned. So, this is what's happening to Judas right now. Judas was the unclean one, but they were the clean one. Jesus's life and teachings had totally impacted these apostles. It had a heart impact on them. It changed their behavior. It changed their way of thinking. It changed their entire future. It pretty much changed everything about their lives, but not so with Judas. Not so with Judas. And so Jesus' word was not able to clean or prune Judas so that he could be more fruitful, because Judas didn't allow himself to be impacted by it. He turned to another vine. And in the other vine, things don't always work out that well. Okay, well, that was the introduction right there. We've talked about that. Let's talk about remaining in the vine. Remaining in the vine. Yeah. What in the world does that mean, remaining in the vine? Well, let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, in this conversation, Jesus's primary goal is to convince his disciples to remain in the vine. So how do you know that? Because John 16, all this I have told you so that you will not fall away. And so it's obvious. Okay, why didn't you just say everything in John 15? So you won't fall away. He doesn't want them to fall away. He wants them to remain in the vine. Man, we went through this whole period of COVID coming in, the whole world going through COVID, the impacts that it's had in so many different ways, but these impacts have not escaped the church. And the church has been impacted by so many things that have happened during this time. I think one of the main things that I've been trying to focus with my brothers and sisters in Frederick is to remain. Remain. Because the temptation to not remain is real. It's an incredible temptation to not remain. Probably because, we're not meeting together as much as we were for a long period of time. And we didn't maybe realize how important that was for us and how encouraging that would be. And we've done everything we can with online and all that kind of stuff for those who could. And I just, thank you for the church leaders who have made all the adjustments to be able to do that. But a lot of people have struggled. And I think the big message is just remain. Don't quit. Don't give up. Remain in the vine. Why would these guys, these apostles, after 3 years with Jesus, why would they be tempted? Well, in John 15:18, the world will hate them. Okay, well, that might be a temptation. The world is going to hate you. Okay, well, I don't know if I want the world to hate me. The world is going to persecute you. What? I'm going to get hated and persecuted. The world may try to kill them. I mean, these are reasons why people might consider not remaining, okay? They're going to hate you. All right, I can deal with that. I don't care what they think about me. They're going to persecute you. Well, exactly what kind of persecution are we talking about here, Jesus? Well, they might kill you. What? Okay, you may think about not remaining in the vine in those circumstances, which would be a very bad decision, but you may be tempted. Where am I up there? I think I can't see backwards that well. All right. So Jesus, he's the true vine, but he knew that other false vines would become temptations. Here's some of them. The religious leaders in Jerusalem, they were turning to power, politics, and evil practices. Now, the third one, I said evil practices, okay? But everything else before that is not necessarily evil in and of itself. It's not evil to have power or evil to be involved in politics. It just depends on what role you let those things play in your life. If they become your vine, that's not going to be healthy. That's a false vine. How about Judas, who turned to money? Money is not evil. It is the root of all kinds of evil, but it's not evil. But if it becomes our vine, well, that's not going to be healthy. In John 15:19, part A, for those of you, if you're not used to seeing like part A, like part A, you can't put an A in there or something like that. Most of you probably have seen that, but we have some younger people here. You know, the chapters and the verse numbers, they were invented anyway. So later on, people came along and said, if I want to put an A and B in there, I can put an A and B in there. But it just means the first part of John 15, verse 19. It says, if you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. I mean, okay, that sounds more comfortable than them hating me, than them persecuting me, and maybe them killing me. I'd like them to love me, right? So maybe they would be tempted to just blend in. Just blend in so everyone will leave them alone. I mean, they can love me if they want, but at least leave me alone. Enough of the persecution and definitely no killing. That's unacceptable. What would tempt you? What would tempt you? What is tempting you? What are the vines that are tempting you? Dave Luck and I talked just briefly right before the service. And he's just such an awesome brother. Haven't probably talked to him face to face in 4 years or something like that. And he was just like immediately open with me. And now I can confess his sins to you. No, I'm just kidding. This is a very strong brother in the Lord right here, okay? But he's just very strong. Yeah, COVID has had an impact on me. I didn't think it would, but it did, you know? And he said, sometimes I look back and I think, what was I thinking when I said that? What was I thinking when I did that? Because things tempt us. What is tempting you? What vine is tempting you to leave the vine of Jesus when the gardener is God? So you can go to some other vine who knows who God is. I have a feeling we know who God is. And every other vine, actually. And every other vine. But this is good for us to think about because we're just like them. We're tempted just like they would be tempted. And Jesus doesn't want us to be. Does that say like the benefits of remaining in the vine behind me? It does. Man, I am like right on track. I'm fired up. When we remain in the vine, we get to bear much fruit. Hey, look, if I never knew what that meant, I would still be pretty excited about it. I mean, this sounds like a good thing, doesn't it? I'm going to bear much fruit. I mean, that sounds awesome to me. But in verse 7, we find out that our prayers will be answered. When we're remaining in the vine, God is answering our prayers. In verse 11, when we're remaining in the vine, we'll find joy. In verse 10, if we're remaining in the vine, we will have Jesus's love in our life. This is sounding pretty sweet in this vine. In verse 1, God will be our caregiver, the gardener, right? If we remain in the vine. Like, don't be fooled by all these other vines. How are we going to improve on this? God is the caregiver. Jesus' love, joy. God's answering our prayers. He's working our lives to bear fruit. How are we going to improve on that? And that's why Jesus is trying to persuade them, remain in the vine. And he's using these truths to persuade them, remain in the vine. And what about you? Are you thinking about coming out of the vine? Are you here and you're already out of the vine? That could be true too. I'm in the same position. You know, every day we decide to remain in the vine. It's a daily decision that we make. And what does it mean? Oh yeah, good. What does it mean to remain in the vine? Well, it's not confusing. It is confusing until Jesus explains it. John 15, 9 and 10. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. You know, a lot of attention is given to faith and belief in the Christian world. Well, there's a good reason for it, because belief and faith are extremely important. But I do feel that it does exist out in the Christian world that the idea of obedience, it's just like knocked off the list. Like obedience is a bad word. It's a negative connotation. It's like, what? You believe in salvation by works? No, I believe in obedience. Why do I believe in obedience? Because if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. That's why I believe in obedience. This guy named Jesus said it. He's related to Christianity in some way. So what does it mean to remain in the vine? Like, continue to follow my teachings, Jesus is saying. Be faithful by practicing my teachings, Jesus is saying. Live the way that I've taught you to live, Jesus is saying. Continue to learn, grow, mature in your walk with Jesus. This is what it means to remain in the vine. To understand his teachings, put them into practice, learn them, put them into practice. That's what it means. Live the Christian life. Live like a disciple. We could say this so many ways, but this is what he's getting at. It doesn't mean to just believe. It doesn't just mean to have faith. Well, if you understand the biblical definition of faith, then it does, okay? Even the biblical definition of belief, then it would. But just the common ideas that people have about it. No, we remain in the vine. We remain in his love. How does it happen? Well, we learn from him and we do what he teaches us. And that's how it happens. You think, well, that doesn't sound great. Well, actually, it's pretty awesome. I'll give you some examples before we move on. Just think about any type of teaching. It doesn't work if you don't do it. Teachings don't work if you don't do it. Let me teach you how to take care of your car so it'll last longer. Then I give you a long list. By the way, don't ask me to do that. I would not be the right person. I would be like, go to a good mechanic. But anyhow, but if you don't do it, it isn't going to work. It's as simple as that. Oh, well, I could teach you. Let me teach you how to shoot a bow. I like to shoot bows. Okay. I could teach you how to do that. But if you don't listen, then it won't work. What else could I teach you about? I don't know. Let me teach you about wetland ecology. Yeah, I know about wetland ecology, something like that. If you don't use the principles, they won't work. If you're restoring wetlands, which is what I worked in. I'm just saying that if you try to teach me how to play the piano, first of all, it might be a lost cause. But if it wasn't a lost cause, if I don't listen to you, I'm not going anywhere. It totally makes sense that when Jesus is teaching us how to live our life, that if we don't do it, we're not going to obtain the benefit of everything that he has taught us. Remaining in the vine, obtain the benefit of being in the vine. How? By doing what Jesus teaches us. It's pretty much that simple. Let's talk about bearing fruit. I don't know if I have an awful lot of more time left over. So actually, I did bring this. By the way, all college students, I'm not checking my email or my text right now. Just want to see what time it is. 11:58. Okay. Just trying to set an example. Just trying to set an example and make sure you know. Bearing much fruit. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky, but I hope you'll get this, all right? Remaining in the vine is the command or the teaching. Bearing the fruit is the promised benefit of remaining in the vine. And in that regard, then it's God's part, because our part is to remain in the vine. Now we know remaining in the vine means obeying the teachings of Jesus. That's all of it. All the teachings of Jesus, actually. That's whether we're going and making disciples, or whether we're getting into his word, we're praying, we're fellowshipping, we're serving the poor, we're allowing God to move in our life to help us grow and change, all those things. But we have to do our part. Our part is to remain in the vine, which means learn about Jesus and put into practice what he teaches us. That's our part. God's part is the promised benefit, which is that we're going to bear much fruit. It's impossible to remain in the vine and then there won't be fruit, because Jesus always does what he says he's going to do. And God always keeps his promise. And so I was thinking in the text here, there's two kinds of fruit that are talked about. One of them is the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this must come from the Spirit. I mean, why would you call something the fruit of the Spirit if it didn't come from the Spirit? Okay, the title of it is the fruit of the Spirit. These things, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all of the profound impacts that these qualities will have on every area of our life is fruit from being in the vine. Just think about these things for a little bit and ask yourself, if I have these in my life, What are all the amazing things that are going to be happening when I have these qualities in my life? It's a lot. That's fruit. That's fruit from remaining in the vine. Also, there's the fruit of testifying. In 1 Corinthians 3, 6 and 7, it says, this is Paul speaking, the Apostle Paul. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. Who's the one who's making it grow? God is making it grow. But you see how Paul and Apollos are doing their part? They're remaining in the vine. They're doing their part. They're obeying what they've been told to do. But God is the one who's making it grow. He is the one who's bearing fruit. So in this context, we just have to think about, we need to do our part, which is remain in the vine. And all that encompasses, can't talk about that today. Remain in the vine. Follow the teachings of Jesus. Put them into practice. And then God will do his part, which is produce fruit, which is awesome. These fruits that God produces are awesome in our lives. Fruit of the Spirit is included in John 15. I just wanted to show you. This is John 15, 9 through 13. You see all the purple up there? All the purple up there has to do with love and joy. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his friends. A little bit further, verse 16 and 17. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. You can't miss it. It's impossible to miss it. Love, joy. In Galatians 5:22, the first two fruits of the Spirit listed are love and joy. These are fruits, and you can't miss it. Jesus absolutely had that on his mind. In 1 Corinthians 13:13, it says, and now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Like, what's the thing that will last? Fruit that will last. Well, one fruit that will last is love. When the time comes that we all end up with God, and I don't know how it all works exactly. You know, is heaven and earth coming together and we're dwelling, or is we up in heaven? I don't know exactly. There's a lot of, beliefs about how that works. But I do know this: I don't need faith when that time comes. And I won't need hope when that time comes, because I'll be with them. And it'll all be done. But what I will have is love, because that's the thing that remains. That is fruit that lasts, for sure. I'm pretty sure Jesus had love on his mind, since that was like the word that came out of his mouth quite often in that. How about the fruit of testifying? Is that included in John 15? Yeah, the right place. When the advocate comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth who goes out from the Father, he will testify about me, and you also must testify, for you have been with me from the beginning. These people are going to go and make disciples. They're going to baptize them, and they're going to teach them to obey everything that God has commanded them. And those disciples are going to do the exact same thing. Man, Jesus was thinking about this. My prayer is not for them alone. Just a little bit later after this, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they all also be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. Is Jesus talking about making disciples in John 15? He's absolutely talking about making disciples in John 15. Disciple making, soul saved, however you want to put it. Remain in the vine, because if you do, you will bear much fruit. Anyway, that's why Jesus came. I just can't imagine how, like hours before he was going to be crucified, that the idea of souls being saved didn't cross his mind. This is definitely what he's talking about as he's talking about this. But I do want to give you a caution, and I do want to give you some encouragement, because remember, this is designed to help people remain in the vine, not give up and quit in discouragement. So I made a list. There are many roles when it comes to bearing fruit, when we talk about the fruit of souls being saved. And as disciples, we do them all. We share our faith with people. We study the Bible with people. We encourage people who visit the fellowship. We pray for the lost. We give financially to reach the lost. We serve as ushers, sound crew, singers, children's ministry teachers, et cetera, so that we provide an environment where people can come and see the body of Christ alive and flourishing. We have good talks with people. We share our testimonies. We share scriptures. I didn't put it in there, but I should say we cook meals. That's a big one. We cook meals for people. There are many ways in which we all together in the vine contribute to see this fruit born. This is the part that we're playing. This is the remaining in the vine part. God then, when we do that, when the body of Christ is working together, all working together in this way, then in God's timing, we will always produce fruit, because the Bible says if we remain in the vine, we will bear much fruit. And so we get past that whole idea of personal fruitfulness. When I was younger, this was something we talked about a lot. Have you personally met somebody that you personally studied the Bible with, that personally got baptized? You know, have you been personally fruitful? Well, first of all, that's not bad to do that, by the way. That's awesome. You know, wonderful, wonderful. You know, great. But I had a sister 2 years ago say to me, I've never been personally fruitful, and I'm hoping I'll be personally fruitful this year. And I was like, no, you're totally wrong. You are completely wrong. You've been in my church for 10 years. Think of all the people who've been baptized in the years that you've been in my church. It's not my church. You get the church that I was leading. All those people, you have been personally fruitful because you worked in the children's ministry, because you sang the songs when we were singing, because you prayed when we prayed, because you gave the money, because you were reaching out to people, all kinds of reasons. You know, there's no personal fruitfulness. It's the vine that is fruitful. We remain in the vine. We have lots of branches. I'm not saying you shouldn't be encouraged, but just remember, God is the one who makes it grow. All of us, we're just remaining in the vine. I love it. I remember one time Phil, I heard him talk about it. I have to get these exact words. It was like group fruit, I think. I'm probably not saying it properly, but there was a lesson Phil did a long time. He's talking about group fruit or, collective fruit or whatever. And he's right on. You know, can you just imagine if I went out and shared my faith? I was like, will you come? I want to study the Bible with you. Awesome. Great. Would you like to come to church with me? Great. They show up to church. It's me. You know, I shall lead the singing. I will say the opening prayer. You have children, but I can't have child ministry because I'm the only one here. You know, can you imagine this? And then, and now I'm going to take you out to lunch so we can get some personal time together. It doesn't work that way. And I'm only sharing this, not because I'm trying to make you think it's not important to share your faith, because that would be the wrong message. Not because I don't think it's important for us to study the Bible with people, because that would be the wrong message. I'm just saying that together, we're all in the vine, connected to Jesus, with God as the gardener. And he's producing fruit, all kinds of fruit in our lives. And he's using that fruit to make us a light, a corporate light, a group light to the world around us. So they come into our fellowship and they're like, wow, this is awesome. God must be here. Tell me what you know. I'll tell you what we know. We are in the vine of Jesus Christ. You should join up. You should come in. Okay, I'm concluding. I may have gone over my time, but on the other hand, the communion was short. So this is to my Father's glory, Jesus said, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. What a privilege. What an amazing life we have. It is so awesome for us to be able to live in this life in the vine of Jesus, and for God to use us to produce the fruit that he produces in so many people's lives. And I think that's the message of today. If you've been going through hard times or struggling or be tempted by other things, hopefully this message will communicate to you the very thing that Jesus wants you to get, which is simply this: remain in the vine. Have a good week.